Hey guys, welcome back to Big Shoulders, the video podcast about the greatest city in the world, the second city that is second to none. Today, I wanted to, I keep digging. Our last episode, we talked a bit about the proposed 78th community area, the $9 billion of investment that would go into said area between the South Loop and Chinatown, the billionaire sports franchise owners that some want to fund it entirely privately out of their own pocket, and of course the other one that doesn't. It got me thinking about sort of where we're at as a city right now and the bigger problem that we're facing. Again, as a dyed-in-the-wool Chicagoan, um, it really, I'm really concerned about the fact that our city alone has $9 billion. That's billion with a B. We're in the hole, basically $9 billion right now. And most of that has to do with the fact that we've just had some real boneheaded mayors. And unfortunately, our city council has allowed a lot of these things to happen. And we can't keep doing this. For those of you that know, that don't know, the rights to our parking meters in Chicago, our public parking meters in the city of Chicago, those rights were sold off towards the end of Mayor Richard Daley's mayorship, which, let me look up here, Richard Daley. Okay, so he was mayor until 2011. On his way out of office, he had a brilliant idea of selling the rights and therefore the revenue to Chicago's parking meters to Abu Dhabi. And since that was done in 2011, it's on 2025. So for 14 years, the total revenue that has been net by our public parking meters to the good people of Abu Dhabi is $1.5 billion. 1.5 billion with the B. That's really interesting, especially when you consider that the hole that we're in as a city, almost entirely due to unfunded pension liabilities, is $1 billion. So, yeah, I don't. It's ironic. Now, is it possible that if we hadn't done that, that revenue would be smartly used and not wasted? I don't know. But it is interesting that the numbers almost match up. Let me pull up here just kind of where we're at as a city in terms of our unfunded pension liabilities, because it's pretty wild here. Hang on. All right, guys, got it here. So basically, here's where we're at as a city. City of Chicago holds more pension debt than all but 7 American states. 80% of Chicago's property taxes are levied go to pensions. 80%. 40% of every dollar spent by the city of Chicago goes to service debt. And obviously this doesn't surprise me, but what does surprise me is that there aren't more people wringing their hands and ringing the alarm and demanding that, okay, we have to stop this, otherwise the city's going to go off a cliff. Yeah, it doesn't make sense that we don't have a city charter. Most major American cities have a charter, and that basically a charter is a document that basically details what government can and can't do. And it's wild that the city of Chicago doesn't have that. I mean, if you understand our history, kind of makes sense. A lot of the gangsters went away decades ago, but they all became politicians. Not all of them, but we have a system where a lot of our aldermen, which are known as city council people in other cities, really have carte blanche to deal with businesses and individuals as they want. There really is no governing document, again, a charter, that says, say, for example, that if the city wants to borrow money, raise taxes, or spend money on something in particular, there's no city charter that says, well, okay, if you want to do that, you have to put a proposition on the ballot in the next election, and you have to get 70% Chicago residents to approve that. Otherwise, you can't borrow, you can't spend, and you can't raise taxes. Can you imagine how different the city of Chicago would be if there were some sort of guardrails? You actually had to get approval for all of this taxing and spending and regulating uh, before they could do it. We had to approve it. It's the way it should be. There's a really great guy at the Illinois Policy Institute whom I really want to get on the show one day. His name is Austin Berg, and he's written an incredible book called The New Chicago Way. And essentially, this book is a blueprint for better government for the city of Chicago. And that's the thing, is if you're someone who's, lived for a time in Chicago or you've grown up there, there's kind of a, well, government's corrupt and then do nothing. And the truth of the matter is, all of these problems that we have in Chicago are fixable, whether it be our budget shortfalls, our unfunded pension liabilities, our problem with spending money we don't have, or reallocating taxpayer dollars that we said was going to be for one thing ends up disappearing and pops up somewhere else. A city charter that requires our elected alder people in the city council to have to get approval by their residents of their wards, of their neighborhoods, before they're able to just sort of work carte blanche at their own whims, what they decide to do in terms of resources. That's really important, because right now, conceivably, I'm sure it doesn't happen very often, but if, say, you are a business owner, you own a restaurant, a cafe, a bar, whatever it is, and you want to expand just out to the sidewalk. Let's also say that maybe you didn't support your current alderman who's in office, or alderwoman. It's entirely possible that that person doesn't have to permit you to get expansion onto the sidewalk. Now, it wouldn't make sense, because if they allow you to expand your restaurant, cafe, whatnot out onto the sidewalk, conceivably, you could get more patrons. If you have more patrons, you're making more money, and that's more tax revenue that would go to the city. And, as we all know, politicians love tax revenue. So it doesn't make sense for them to do that, but, maybe, conceivably, theoretically, if they don't like you, if you didn't support them in the last election, maybe they decide not to approve that. That's way too much power for an elected official to have. You shouldn't have to do that as a business owner or a homeowner. Let's say you want maybe to make some adjustments to your yard, or to your home. There are limits to, is your home in a historic district? Is your home historic in some way? There needs to be clearer guidelines for all these things, because I have friends that have lived in historic districts or have lived in historic homes and not even known it, and any plans they had for augmenting or improving their home either were dashed completely or drawn out for a really long time. Again, I'm sure this happens very rarely, but it is crazy, but it makes sense that a massive city like Chicago, a big, broad-shouldered, productive, hardworking, hard-loving, we love to have a good time in Chicago city that doesn't have a city charter would be in a position where it's $1 billion in the hole. That's insane. We can't continue to allow this to happen. To the extent that you care about these things, I know that, I tend to like to talk about more positive, fun, great things about Chicago, because Chicago there's no end to the greatness of our city, of what we have to offer. Its livability, its culture, its food, its art, all of these things. But all of that is threatened when we do not hold our elected officials and our government to account. It's our money that they're wasting. And we also can't just accept defeat that, oh, well, it's City Hall, or it's so-and-so in this office. If you do that, they will continue to spend us into oblivion. They won't allocate the funds where it needs to go, and the city goes bankrupt and falls apart. It can happen. It's called Detroit and the state of Michigan. Obviously, what really hurt Detroit and Michigan was the 2008 financial crisis. But that spot was not being well governed. It was not in the best of shape leading up to that. They had some real knuckleheads in office that, for some reason, they had elected, and it's awful because Detroit is a great city full of really great people. I love Detroiters. I love Detroit. I love their food. I love they're very much like Chicagoans, New Yorkers. They're scrappy, blue collar, gritty people who work hard and play hard. And we have a real opportunity in Chicago to not allow what happened to Detroit to happen to us. And I think that's it's very easy to get distracted by our beautiful architecture. It is very easy to get distracted by the wealth of dining options for every single meal throughout our city. It is very easy to get distracted by the entertainment, the art, uh, just the overall great quality of life that we have in Chicago. But we can't remain comfortable. To the extent that you can, get yourselves a copy of The New Chicago Way by Austin Berg. Educate yourself, because this is the thing. They will continue to mismanage. They will continue to spend money they don't have because it's not their money. They don't care, So it's you hear about these people that in government that suddenly have nicer homes or have, I don't know, haircut budgets that are in the tens of thousands of dollars. If we don't hold them to account, if we don't get a real blueprint through a city charter that defines what they can and can't do, what they can and cannot raise taxes on, what they can and cannot spend money on, when they get permissions to do those things, and they get it from us, it's government derives its powers through the consent of the governed, whether it's in the city of Chicago, Cook County, the state of Illinois, or the federal government. And that's not a conservative position. That's just common sense. That's something else too, is to be fiscally sound, to be fiscally sane, that should have absolutely nothing to do with party. Nothing at all. We all work really hard for our money. We all really love our city. We all want it to be great and maybe even better than it is. We can't get there unless we insist that these guardrails, through a city charter or just through, I don't know, us not being so jaded about government. There's nothing. I see all these kids that are protesting everything under the sun these days. Just once, I'd like to see a neighborhood of people, or even young people, because keep in mind, they're spending your future away, whether it be at the city level or the federal level. I'd love to see you guys show up at your elected representative's office instead of throwing, I don't know, bricks through a Starbucks window. Maybe show up at your elected representative's office and say, "Hey, what are you all doing? Where is this money coming from? Or where did this money go? Why are we paying through the nose for taxes and schools on the south side don't have air conditioning? Why are we paying through the nose in taxes and some of our roads look like the surface of the moon?" It's ridiculous. And it doesn't have to be that way. We can't allow ourselves to just be either complacent with the great place in which we live or be jaded when again, these are elected officials. They want to get back into office. If we simply say, "Hey, look, we really need you to do this. We really need you to get the fiscal house in order. We need to know where the money's going. We need to know that the money that we give you is being spent on what you say it's going to be spent on." Again, there's nothing political about that. It's common sense. And we need to hold the city account, because if we don't, like I said, city of New York, they went bankrupt in the 70s. Like, these great cities can go bankrupt. When we continue to elect people and don't hold their feet to the fire, we don't take pride in where we live. And part of having that pride and that love of our city has to be that the people who are stewards of it, and it's as much us as it is politicians, that has to be top of mind, because they will crash the city. They will bankrupt the city. It can become New York City in the 70s. It can, or was it 70s or 80s? It can become Detroit, and it's depending on the level of damage that's done through all of this mismanagement. I would hate to see anything like that happen to Chicago, and I don't think it will. I think Chicago, our population, we have a very young population. Something like 2/3 of our city are between 18 and 34. You guys have every reason in the world to be optimistic about your future. Despite all the hand wringing and the doom saying about high technology, AI, and all that, I don't think a lot of these things are going to come to pass. I think we have a really bright future, and maybe all these tech folks that have been pouring into Chicago should do something novel. I would really love to see someone in the tech space, some cool upstart young person in Chicago, run for a position on the city council and get the city government of Chicago on blockchain. Why can't we blockchain city government, county government, state, federal government? Theoretically, it's possible. It absolutely can be done. And again, they're spending away your future, young folks, and those of us that are, we're not old, but we're not young either. We have to hold them to account. And we have all the tools with blockchain. We have all the ability with just going to our representative's office and say, hey, what are we doing here? $1 billion, folks. That's a lot of money. We can't allow either mismanagement or people double dipping, because there's people that are pulling multiple pensions off the system too. Again, it's unfortunately part of the Chicago way, and a lot of folks do that. We can't allow this. People that are drawing 2 6-figure salaries, there's something fundamentally wrong with that. I don't know. Double dipping like that doesn't seem fair. It's up to us, guys. So, are we going to blockchain Chicago? Are we going to keep the greatest city in the world as great as it can be? I hope so. Let me know your thoughts. Is this something you propose? Is this something you've ever heard of? Would you support such a measure to keep government honest and within its limits and accountable to us, the voters? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've hung in this long, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.